story set in the universe of the Final Fantasy VII Remake, Traces of Two Pasts by Kazushige Nojima and translated by Stephen Kohler. This novel in two parts explores the never-before-seen backstory of two of the main protagonists, Tifa Lockhart and Aerith Gainsborough, in their lives before they entered the story we know. The setting takes place in the world of Final Fantasy VII Remake. More specifically for Tifa, it takes place in both Nibelheim, her hometown, and Midgar, where the story begins. Tifa is the only girl in a small town, and as such is the object of all the boys' affections. One day she meets a man who changes her life forever. For Aerith, we see her life in Midgar, from the research labs in the Shinra headquarters to her quiet childhood in Sector 5. A girl who grew up with abilities she didn't understand and a legacy sought by so many, she struggles to hold on to the life she has come to know against mounting pressures from Shinra and everyone else. The novel is really two novellas, each one focusing on one of the two main female protagonists. Tifa Lockhart is a strong, independent woman who can take care of herself, but she wasn't always that way. We see her journey as she forges who she is going to be from the trials of tragedy, courage, and resourcefulness as she makes her way to her final destination. With Tifa, we are reminded that we don't always choose our paths in life, but every road we take adds to who we become. Aerith Gainsborough is a child and the last of the ancients. Her mother, a research subject of Professor Hojo, escapes with the help of a sympathetic Shinra employee, but the research has taken its toll, and soon Aerith finds herself alone and without anyone to guide her. But fortune places her in the custody of Elmira, a woman living in the Sector 5 slums, and they forge a life together. The story's framing device takes place as the party is traveling away from Midgar to their eventual destination of Costa del Sol. Tifa and Aerith each recount their stories to the other members of the group as they travel. Tifa's story begins in the small town of Nibelheim, a location seen in the game. It shows how the tiny settlement became a company town and effectively how much they depended on the massive organization known as Shinra. Living there with her father, Tifa is one of the few young women and as such is the object of affection for most of the boys there. I thought the story did a good job of conveying Tifa as a young woman, showing her growth from a little girl in a small town to a more worldly fighter capable of handling herself in unfamiliar circumstances. We get to see her meet Zangan, the martial artist who taught her how to fight, as well as how she made her way in her early days in Midgar. The author tells a convincing and entertaining narrative as we follow Tifa through her journey, filling in gaps that could never be told in the games, highlighting the benefits of multiple media in a franchise. We are taken through Tifa's trials and tribulations and brought to see the inner workings of both Nibelheim and the slums of Midgar with far more depth and detail than we could ever hope to see in the main narrative. Tifa's story was interesting and compelling with more than a few surprises. Even though I knew the general shape the space of the story had to fit into, the author did a wonderful job crafting an original narrative to fill in the gaps and make her story more complete. Aerith's tale begins when she and her mother escape the Shinra lab. We see some of her life inside the Shinra building, a young girl incapable of understanding what is really going on or what they want from her and her mother. The majority of the story is from the perspective of a young girl growing up with the things she doesn't understand. I think it was handled very well, and as she learns about the world, so do we. We see more of the background about the life she led before she entered the story of the games, as well as additional details for the area she lived in. Elmira gets a great deal more depth, and it elaborates on how Aerith becomes the person she is destined to be. Although for Aerith's story I felt the ending was a bit out of nowhere, I suppose it did a good job enough wrapping up the last bit of story, although if you ask me it could have been done without it and I wouldn't have felt anything was missing. Additionally, there was a small sub-story at the end which had to do with a young boy, now a man, who had known Aerith during her time at Shinra. I think that to me it just felt extraneous. It added a little depth being from an outside perspective, but it only peripherally connects to the main story, if that. Though it adds a bit of detail to Shinra's operating procedure, it was never really something we knew was happening during the games, so the sub-story I could take or leave. Overall, a book I recommend. If you like werewolves, check out my book Blue Moon, available in paperback and ebook on Amazon. Thanks for watching. If you liked it, click the subscribe button and leave a comment below. Meow.